It has to start somewhere. It has to start sometime. What better place than here? What better time than now? Welcome to episode 4 of Chatting Vintage Games, or CVG, if you're clever with your acronyms. My name is Chris Scullion, and I'm joined by the man, the myth, the bell end, Jordan Middler. Hello, Jordan. How are you?
Chris Scullion, well, here I am, doing everything I can, holding on to what I am. Then I'm a Superman. I'm ready.
I was going to start with Lights Out Guerrilla Radio, turn that shite off, but I remembered YouTube's got like a 5-second swearing filter at the start. And anyway, in case you hadn't already guessed, today we're discussing the video game series of our Mr. Anthony Hawk, the Birdman, I believe they cry him. The Tony Hawk series, which began on the PlayStation 1 way back when, and has kind of stagnated in recent years. Does the series, a very good remake.
Does the series currently exist? Is it an ongoing series, would you say?
It's valid, but I don't know, but I'm sure we'll get to that at the end. Although this is mainly retro focused, it would be daft not to look at the kind of where the series has ended up and what could be coming next, because chances are it'll be another look back, I would imagine.
Please God.
But shall we start at the start?
Let's go for it. It's a very good place to start.
Was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, otherwise known as Tony Hawk's Skateboarding in the UK, the one that you started with?
No, I actually started on... I think the first one I ever played was 3 because I rented it, but I have subsequently... it's one of the few series I've genuinely run the gamut with, but it's as we'll go into it, I feel like the people's memories of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater are largely built on 1, and that's not just because they have remade every 1 level and basically like 9 of these games. But yeah, that's really what kicked it off, and a few different versions, which was the style at the time.
The number of times I've played that warehouse, in a million different forms.
That's the way you can tell if it's a good Tony Hawk game or not. If warehouse feels correct, then you're off to a flyer. That's all you need.
Definitely, and we'll definitely get to that later, because there was one game where Warehouse absolutely did not feel correct. Well, a couple of games actually. So Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was released on the PlayStation 1 and was then ported to the Nintendo 64 and the Sega Dreamcast. Those were kind of slightly higher res versions. And for those not familiar with the initial game, the whole point was 2-minute runs. And in each 2-minute run, there were a bunch of different tasks you had to tick off. Your high score challenges, collecting various things, collecting the skate letters, finding the hidden VHS tape, which ages us all. And yeah, it was even back then when you play. I've been playing through them all recently for capturing footage for the book, for everything I do is writing books for this video. It's amazing how much the first one still holds up.
Yeah, I think there's a real this era of games, there's a lot that can be said for just having a nice frame rate, just controlling well and being responsive. There's something about the original Tony Hawk that is really so mechanics focused that sets it apart from a lot of stuff. And I think you mentioned the 2-minute runs there. I think games have lost a term I'd like to describe as Giza shotability. I think the 2-minute runs meant that playing it with friends was like not only fun, but it's so well structured to just be like, okay, I'll do a run, then you do a run, and we're swapping the controller before it ever had like local split screening stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And it was also that it's got that Giza go ability, but it's also Giza another go ability, in which the fact that you could so quickly quit and restart, and you were never restarting a run that lasted any longer than 2 minutes, because that was the nature of the game. If you wanted to build a combo and you go on your arse, you know that you've only committed a certain amount of time, and you can start again and again and again. And that was how you got some amazingly good Tony Hawk players, because the amount of practice they got doing the same lines and the same gaps over and over and over and over again until they absolutely nailed the timing. And yet it never felt frustrating. Like when I was capturing the footage for this video, not book, I forgot how, I didn't forget, but I was a lot worse at it than I used to be, because it's been a while since I've played Tony Hawk. But I had no issues playing the school level for 40 minutes over and over again until I got footage that makes me look half decent.
I think when you say about the great players and stuff like that, the hidden depth was, if a run kept going, your time kept going. So these players who are getting like 1 million scores and 2 million scores, the first 2 minutes, that was small change. Once you get that line that you can just do repeatedly, and the only thing stopping you is like the manual and the grind meter, that's when it really got to. It was almost gambling because of the way the multiplier worked. If you bailed, you lost all of your points essentially. So you'd be like, okay, let me get to times 60, and then I'll call it. Then you'd get to times 60 and still feel good about it, and then you go times 65, and then you'd lose it in 63 and just go absolutely mental. But then all you had to do was right, we go again, and that's also key to something that the later games lost. A Tony Hawk game, you have to have immediate restarts. There can be no delay whatsoever. It has to be immediate.
Yeah, it's the perfect risk and reward game because, like you say, like you're always gambling with the combos, but also the longer your combo goes, the kind of shittier your grind and manual meters go.
Yeah.
So at first your balance is kind of okay, but the more you grind and the more you manual, those meters get more and more finicky and more twitchy, and it gets to the point where you have to go, if I grind one more time, I'm going to my arse.
Yeah.
If I manual one more time, I'm going to end up on my back here. At what point do I stop? And kind of
to the point where those meters actually load in before the UI comes up for them. So like pro players are like pre-flicking before the image comes up, so that you can get like an extra frame of being able to go. Like there's a lot of hidden depth to that I feel like I feel like saying stumbled upon is rude, but I can't imagine when they were putting it together, they thought that they would be developing a trick system that, beyond the things that they added in the next couple that we'll talk about, pretty much just as good as it was then as it is today.
Well, that's the thing, that this was never supposed to be a blockbuster game. Like, well, at least when it was initially created, like, Activision wanted to tap into the extreme sports market, which wasn't that big.
Yeah.
Like at the time, it was a very niche thing, and the developer was a very small developer. It's not like not that they were tiny, but it's not like they'd say, oh, let's get who was big at the time, let's get Acclaim on this. They kind of they weren't expecting big things, but the developer gave them big things, and it's just, they nailed it first time. And fair enough, when you go back now, if anyone says I'm new to the series, where should I start? Nobody should start at 1 because of the stuff they added in 2 and 3, which we'll get to in a bit. But even without those extra moves added, 1 still holds up remarkably well. And there's still stuff that's really satisfying, like when you start the mall level and go down that big ramp right at the very start and try and pull off a 900 right at the start just for a laugh.
Crashing through boxes of Bruce Willis's Apocalypse and the original versions.
That has aged it slightly.
Yeah.
Those are one things in Tony Hawk 1 that I didn't like, is those A to B stages.
Yeah.
For me, Tony Hawk at its best is the open world stages where you go around freely and look for the gaps and look for the things to trick off. I didn't like the idea of
the downhill jams.
Yeah.
Interestingly, exactly. Tony says that Downhill Jam's his favourite level, and I'm not one to speak ill of his lordship, the Birdman, but that's a terrible take for the first couple of Tony Hawk games.
Tony, mate, you're a wank. No, that is probably my least favourite level. So I mean, Tony. If it wasn't for Tony, we wouldn't have these. So I'm not going to be too harsh.
I mean, who would have played Bob Burnquist Pro Skater? Me. That's who. I'm a big Bob mark.
You put Alyssa Steamer in a game, yeah. I'm all over it.
What do you know about Rodney Mullen? Let's talk about Rodney Mullen for the next 3 hours.
That's the thing, they became household names, so many of those, like Kareem Campbell, etc. But only literally household names, and that was it. Like, I still couldn't tell you a thing about them. Other than
I only know that Rodney
one
Mullen,
wore a Freddy Krueger jumper.
Rodney Mullen, I believe, is the guy that Tony Hawk says, like, this guy is like the god of skateboarding, like the way he can manipulate a skateboard. He invented so many. I think Rodney Mullen might have invented the ollie. Like, I think that's how, like, goated status Rodney Mullen is. He is like the man. I know Bob Burnquist is Brazilian, and that's it.
Good. I mean, that's it. That's them covered. Well, that's all we've got time for. But no, it's kind of like it was always interesting every game to see who was new and who was dropped, and some of them like stayed for the duration. You would get a couple who would drop out every now and then. I can't remember who it was. I'm sure one of them dropped out because they did a deal with someone else.
This is much later, but Danny Way was the Danny Way story, and this is I've not thought about this in a long time, so this is kind of fourth-hand knowledge, but I believe Danny Way claims that he was in fact the first person to do the 900, and that it was falsely attributed to the Birdman. So Danny Way became the face of the Skate series, which we won't get into here, apart from a glancing mention. But yeah, the thing about the characters coming in and out, it's funny when you can see the jackassification of Tony Hawk, because in Pro Skater 3, Bam appears, and he's just like a normal skateboarder. He's got his hem top on. Pro Skater 4, he's a much bigger deal. And then suddenly Thug happens, an even bigger deal. And then Thug 2 happens, and the series
just becomes Jackass at that point.
Yeah, it has a bit of an identity crisis.
You're unlocking Wee Man and Bam's
Phil Margera.
Come on.